My name is von Koenigsegg. I'm 40 years old, and for half of my life I've been on the quest to be a leader in the hypercar industry, utilizing Swedish design combined with visionary technical solutions. Our latest car, the Agera R, is built in the old hangars of a former Swedish fighter jet squadron. Their symbol, a ghost, is now proudly painted on the back of every Koenigsegg. So now I'm going to show you something which we're working on for the future, which I personally find very, very interesting in many aspects. So what this is what we call an actuator. It's a free valve actuator. Most of you who are familiar with combustion engines and especially car engines know that there are camshafts involved to move the valves inside the cylinder head. And these valves, they have been controlled by camshafts for the last 150 years or something like that. But it's very restrictive really, especially if you have multi-cylinders and you want to have a rev range to go through with efficiency and power. Because when you have a camshaft, you basically lock up all the cylinders in the same line to do pretty much the same thing. There are coming systems now which give some flexibility. You can tweak the angle a little bit compared to the crank of the engine, and you can slide them sideways like Audi is doing to shut off cylinders now. So it's getting better and better, but it's still very, very restrictive. You can think of the camshaft like a broom. Pretty much you hold it in your hands and you push all the valves simultaneously with this broomstick. What the free valve system does is that each valve becomes individual. So if you think of the valves like keys on a piano, suddenly instead of pushing all the keys at the same time with a broomstick, you can actually play the keys with your fingers, which is the free valve idea. And then of course the engine can perform in a completely different way than being forced into a preset pattern of combustion. So what we're going to show you here is this is like a small cutout of a cylinder head. Here we have one valve. Normally there are two intake valves and two exhaust valves. But here is just a small rig to run one of these free valve actuators. So basically here you have the valve, here you have the actuator, it goes into like this. This is lubricated by engine oil and pressurized by pressurized air, which acts like an air hammer to move this out. Then the engine oil makes sure it stays stable and can lock it in different positions, and then air or a metal spring, air spring or a metal spring pushes it back. So we have individual control over each valve, which brings great benefit to the combustion cycles in the engine. So it's actually a snowballing effect. The engine becomes lighter, smaller, cheaper, cleaner. It can change the look of the car in the end. So it's a very, very interesting technology that I'm sure one way or the other will conquer the cylinder heads of the world. So here we'll go in a little bit to details how it works. Urban, who's partly responsible for this development, will show you a little bit what it looks like.
It's a very simple control system. We have one signal for each valve, and when we tell it to open, it opens with a few milliseconds delay, and when we tell it to close, it closes with, again, a few milliseconds delay. This it can do at very high speeds, up to 20,000 RPM if necessary.
The same size of actuator is actually good for a small motorcycle engine revving 15,000 RPM and a truck engine revving 2,500 RPM. Because the motorcycle valve is very light, so it takes the same energy to drive it backwards and forwards at 15,000 RPM as it takes to drive a huge heavy truck valve backwards and forwards at 2,500 RPM. So it's very neat that the same actuator basically covers the need for all different engine sizes. So now we're running at what kind of RPM here?
Well, here's a little bit over idle.
This is actually the movement of the valve. So you can see it goes quickly up and then it stays flat up. It's like having a square camshaft profile to make the engine breathe really well. If you would have a square camshaft profile, it would break immediately because it would jump off the edges and would start hitting the valve stem and it wouldn't work. But with the free valve system, you can actually open any way you like and open really fast, stay open flat, and then drop down. Here it's possible to see the valve seating as well, that it's a smooth curve, so it doesn't hit the valves, it creates noise and wear.
This is 3000 RPM, and you can see still a square form of the valve curve. It's 9000 RPM.
So this might just look like an old Saab to you all, and in fact it is, apart from one aspect, and that aspect is what you see that's red here, and that's the cylinder head, which has been modified to accommodate our Cargin free valve system. So basically what we've done here is we've taken the cylinder head apart, machined out all the mountings and so on for the camshafts, and installed 16 Cargin free valve actuators. And then we have designed a special valve cover, or it's not really a valve cover, it's more a lid containing pressurized air channels and pressurized oil channels coming from the engine oil side. You can see the height of this black cover here. That's the same height as the standard cylinder head used to be. So even when we retrofit it, when it's not optimized for space, it's anyway lower than the standard cylinder head, so the engine actually shrinks and becomes lighter. If we would have made a cylinder head from scratch, instead of retrofitting into an existing cylinder head, it would also become much narrower and even lower. And this whole section here, which is a cover for where the chain drive for the camshaft used to sit, would disappear completely, so the engine would also become a lot shorter. Basically, when you go from a camshaft to Cargin free valves, the size of a 4-cylinder engine becomes just a little bit bigger than the size of a 3-cylinder engine. And then of course, if you cut away one cylinder to maintain the power and torque level you used to have in your 4-cylinder engine, then it becomes really much smaller. So this car here has been running with Cargin free valve system winter and summer for the last 2.5 years. We've accumulated almost 60,000 kilometers without any failure whatsoever to the free valve system. It's just been upgraded with our latest generation actuator, generation 5, on both the intake and exhaust side of the engine. And it's been up-tested at a testing institute called AVL with up to 20% improvement in fuel efficiency so far. This is, and that's just the starting point, I would say. This is more a test mule to run for durability and for cold starts, even in the winter down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. But it's really exciting, and it's I think one of the few cars in the world that is running with no camshafts whatsoever. When it's fully optimized, we're expecting to have 30% less fuel consumption, 30% more torque and 30% more power, and in an average driving cycle, 50% less emissions. And that's without connecting it to the possibility, which is very interesting, which is an air tank. Given this valve technology, we can actually recoup energy while engine braking by using the engine as an air pump, pumping up a tank with air, getting air pressure there, and then driving off only on that air, using the engine as a compressor, or let's say an air engine. That compressed air can also be used for boosting the engine while using fuel to have like a really big quick spooling turbo which consumes no energy. So instead of storing energy in a battery, an electric battery, we're using an empty tank of air. So that's kind of the next step of this technology, but already without that it's huge benefit compared to normal camshafts. This technology is not yet in Koenigsegg, and it's something, of course, we might plan to do for the future. Will be another 3-4 years out before it's in any production car, and hopefully the Koenigsegg could be one of the first.